Well, hello, happy Tuesday, everyone. Hope you are doing well. For today's Fireside Chat, I want to begin by reading a couple verses out of Galatians chapter 6, and then just give you an update and kind of where we are in terms of our response as a church to the coronavirus and our trajectory moving forward. But I want to read these verses, and I will be drawing on these as I talk about our response. So Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. Apostle Paul says, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." So as we think about where we are right now, I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing right now, especially for the state of Florida. The last couple press conferences that we've heard from Governor DeSantis indicate that the social distancing and the quarantine measures have had a positive effect in terms of flattening the curve. Our numbers, thankfully, are nowhere near where they were projected to be, and we also are staying well ahead of the game in terms of hospital capacity and all that. And so encourage you to watch those and get that information directly from Governor DeSantis and the press releases that are coming out. And so as he begins to move toward a reopening process, my understanding is that he has said that the stay-at-home order will expire on April 30th, given that everything continues to move in a positive direction. If that's the case, then that will allow for some limited opportunities for people to get back to work and to begin to re-enter normal life, again, while still practicing social distancing measures. So what does that mean for us as a church? I believe what it means is we as a church will still be in a holding pattern for a while. And the reason for that is because that stay-at-home order does not address, the lifting of that rather, does not address the question of public assemblies. So my understanding, and as I've talked with the elders about this and tried to get a consensus of thought where we are in terms of how we're interpreting this, is that the allowance for public assembly is still somewhere down the line from the lifting of that stay-at-home order. And so we will wait and receive direction from the authorities and experts on this, and there are two commitments that are guiding us through this whole process. From day one, we have started with the commitment of the second commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. And so number one, our responsibility before God is that our response in terms of when to begin to reintroduce public assembly as a worship has to meet that criteria of, are we loving our neighbors as ourselves? And I think we have to get a little further into a flattening of the curve and an assurance that it's safe to begin gathering together in groups before we could feel like we're meeting that criteria. And the other commitment we've had is that as long as there's no oppression of the gospel in it, we are committed to following the requirements, the restrictions, and even the guidelines that are given to us by the state, federal, and local authorities. And so as we are understanding what they are telling us, there is not a just kind of a blanket allowance for public assemblies to begin meeting again. There are certain criteria that have to be met in terms of our progress as a state. And so where does that leave us? I don't know for certain, and as I talk to the elders, I think all of us are in that place. We don't know, and we're very reluctant to give a timeline on something that we don't know. We're probably at least several weeks out from public assembly at this point, but again, I think we are in a position where we see progress, we see that we're moving in the right direction, and yet we're still going to have to wait and see for a little bit longer before we can make plans to transition back into embodied worship. I do want to say, however, there's no one who wants that more than me. No one who is eager for that day more than me to have our church gathered together. We also don't know if it's what that's going to look like initially. There's probably going to be a a progressive movement back into what was the norm for us before all of this happened. And so as it gets to the point where we're able to consider that, I think the elders will begin to talk about different scenarios that we can consider to begin to enable our church to experience that, even maybe still with some restrictions or in a limited capacity, as we kind of progressively move back toward the norm over time, while still doing what's best to love our neighbor as ourselves, especially those among us who are vulnerable, and then also being in compliance with local, state, and federal authorities. So I hope that's helpful to you. But again, I just want to remind you of these words that Paul writes to the Galatians. Broad application here can apply to many scenarios, but certainly apply to the situation that we are in right now. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So brothers and sisters, I just want to encourage you right now. I know you may feel weary, and you may be ready for a change of pace. I think we all are. I'm just encourage you by God's grace and by His Spirit. Let us not grow weary of doing good. If we can say the chorus and persevere through this, we will reap as a result of this the benefit of being able to gather again in person. And we have the reminder on the other side of this verse. So then as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those of the household of faith. And so again, the opportunities abound in the midst of this to show love to our neighbors, to reach out, to show mercy and kindness, to pick up the phone and speak words of encouragement and life to others, to do that for everyone as we have opportunity, and especially within the household of faith, to continue to do good to one another. And so let me encourage you in that. As we have received abundant mercy and love from our Savior, let's continue to extend that mercy and love toward everyone, and especially to those of the household of faith.